One of the things that really drives people to give their best is the feeling that they're playing a winnable game.
So you want to improve performance in your teams. You wish to align behaviors with KPIs, but you're not exactly sure how to get started, much less implement and track it. I'm Dr. Joey Fawcett. Welcome back to the Work Positive Podcast. My guest today is an experienced OD leader who specializes in improving performance through data-driven talent development. And his 15 years of talent development experience, he's led programs that have generated more than $2 million in annual impact and improved performance in over 95% of participants. He works with Franklin Covey, maybe you've heard of them, where he coaches global clients to achieve business goals through talent initiatives. So if you're struggling like most of us are with performance management, I mean, who isn't, right? You'll love this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. You're ready, aren't you, Work Positive Nation? I know you are. Well, here is Colin Hahn. Colin, welcome to the Work Positive Podcast, my friend.
Joey, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
The pleasure is all mine. So how did you get into this whole notion of data-driven performance management? Because human behavior has to be one of the most complex things we ever tackle, much less to derive data about it, right?
Yeah, it was from two people that shaped me on the human side and then the system side. I originally thought I was going to be a university professor, and when I realized that there's no jobs in philosophy, well, it turns out that there was an executive coach who was on my paper route as a kid. And so
Really?
Tom took me under his wing, helped me understand that what I had prepared myself for academically was really transferable to the talent development space. And so immediately started getting involved in conversations around coaching, around developing the bench of leaders, around the responsibility of leaders to create culture for their organizations, and really emphasizing the human component of that. Tom was such a phenomenal listener, and I've really tried to model what I've done after some of the lessons I picked up from him. Fast forward a number of years, and a second mentor enters into my life. Guy Wallace is a big name in performance-driven talent development. And through him, I was introduced to the human performance technology space that thinks about how our organizational systems and structures set us up to get different results and outputs. And through that, started thinking about all the data that can support measuring whether it's a manufacturing process or the process of bringing a new employee into the organization, or the process of creating a team with a set of operating models and cultures that help them to be effective.
Oh, okay. So my first introduction to human performance management was when I was a kid in sports. I mean, I was a
Yeah.
typical little boy playing baseball and things like that. What are some of the parallels that you see there between creating a culture in an organization, a company, and creating, say, a baseball team where performance is guided and coached?
Yeah. One of the interesting things is that there's this interplay between learning, developing skills, and stretching yourself, and then performance, generating the outputs. And when you get to the top of the pyramid, right, the folks who are the best performers at their sport or their endeavor have
Mhm.
found a way to bring those things together so that literally every at bat, every basket is an opportunity to try to workshop those skills and think about how they elevate their performance. For those of us mere mortals that are starting on the journey, right, those things are a little bit more separated. And so
Yeah.
there's a real skill in thinking about how do we focus more on one or the other at this particular moment? Is it important to really focus on delivering the result? Is it important to focus on what my motions are so I've got the right technique at that moment? And then seeing the feedback between those things. Oh, that swing didn't go effectively. And so now next time I need to have these cues in mind. Oh,
Mm.
I've got these cues locked in, but now I need to elevate how I'm bringing them together in that performative moment.
Mm.
There's a lot that we can learn from how professionals create the structure for their activity and then break down the different skills until they can finally pull it back together in an organic moment.
I guess I've got baseball on the brain because the College World Series is this weekend. And so I'm thinking about hitters. I hear announcers say this is the first time he's faced this pitcher. So the
Mhm.
first at bat might be dismal, but it was a learning experience to your point if you're a professional. And then by the second, third, and fourth at bat, you should be able to pick up some visual cues from that pitcher to figure out whether he's throwing a slider or a curveball or fastball, right? That's what I hear you say.
Exactly. And that's why we see pitchers that retire after they've gone through the order a couple of times, because all of a sudden the batters have figured out this is what's going to be coming, and they're
Mhm.
able to adjust their approach so that the pitchers no longer have the edge.
Yeah, and after a number of years, they'll move from the National League to the American League, so they can
Exactly.
see
Exactly.
a different setup there. Well, that's absolutely amazing. My friend, Dr. Bob Johansson from the Institute for the Future, who's been on the Work Positive podcast like 3 times now, he likes to talk about gaming being an effective learning medium now. Because what we want to do relative to performance management is that we, as leaders, we want to take persons to the edge of their competence, help them fail graciously, learn from the experience, and move forward. So that's what I hear you talking about. How does gaming enter into this human performance management system that you're so popular with?
Yeah, one of the things that really drives people to give their best is the feeling that they're playing a winnable game. And
Hmm.
when performance management is done correctly, it's giving them both parts of that. It's a game, right? They know how they're doing. Are they winning or they're losing? What is the score? What's the situation? What needs to be done next? But it's also emphasizing that winnable part, that this isn't some objective that's so far out that I don't feel I can achieve it. I've got the sense that this is something I can own and control, and maybe not have 100% influence over, but to have enough to know that, yeah, it's worth me putting in the effort here because I can affect that outcome in a meaningful way.
So gamification is everywhere, and when I can see a leaderboard, I can see that Susie Q is ahead of me, but that means it is winnable because she scored that many points, so I know I should be able to at least score that many points, right?
Yeah, having that standard shows that this is within the realm of possibility. Now,
Yeah.
it's Susie's so much better as a player that I don't see a pathway to get to her level. I
Okay.
might check out. And that's where a great leader can help in breaking things down and saying, here's the next target for you. Here's what your next growth step looks like. Once we can get that sort of granularity, all of a sudden now
Mm.
I've got my own version of this winnable game. And over time, I'm getting closer and closer to that high score that Susie has been holding for decades.
I've heard you use that phrase winnable game several times now, so that's tripped in my memory. Marty Seligman's work around learned helplessness, right?
Yeah.
I've got to feel like this game is winnable. So, how do I, as a leader, a manager, how do I ensure that my team understands the game is winnable and has the hope and optimism, the persistence to drive through their performance?
Yeah. One of the things that I often see is that leaders have a really clear understanding of where they want the team to go, but don't have a whole ton of clarity about how to get there. And
Mm.
that's okay. Oftentimes, we don't know the path through the woods. We're trying to discover it as we go because this is something
Yeah,
that's new and innovative.
right.
But what really distinguishes the great leaders in that environment is that they get really deep into what is the reality that we're facing right now? What are we asking these employees to do? And really thinking about what is getting in the way of them being able to do the things that will win the game. Sometimes there's really clear levers that we want our employees to pull, but we've thrown so many different things at them, or there's so many distractions, or so many SharePoint sites they need to look up information in order to be able to pull those levers. We've made it where they don't feel like there's a reasonable way to end up getting to that objective. And
Mm.
so really getting clear about what is that whole performance environment? What are the conflicting expectations? Where is there missing information? Where are there inadequate tools and resources? Where are there skill gaps? Where are there misalignments of rewards and incentives? Really understanding that is what takes a leader from someone who can give an inspiring speech to someone who can really elevate the environment so that great results can follow.
Yeah, so doing an assessment of the system, but it sounds like also you're talking about communication and the ability of that leader to clarify, here's where we're going. Yeah, we might be building the plane while we fly it, or at least repairing it, but here's our destination. This is our airport that we're going to. So, what are some ways of creating a culture with active listening loops and feedback to the leader to keep a finger on the pulse of here are the friction points, here's where we're moving, we're detouring away from our goal.
Yeah, it's such an interesting challenge because there's so many organizations that deploy employee surveys and have their exit interview data and all of their turnover stats and so many different sources of data, but they don't turn it into information and they certainly don't turn it into action. Where
Say that
there,
again louder for the people on the back row. I think that's one of
data is
the great.
not information and data is not action. Uh, the,
Thank you.
the risk is we spend so much effort telling employees that we're listening, and then we don't do anything that they see with it.
Oh
Like,
boy, do
that
we pay the
they
price.
see is a critical part of this. It's
Mm.
no good to go and do a bunch of executive focus groups and then to say that you've got this action plan that's come out of it. Unless the employees see that leadership is committed to do something and that they've delivered on that commitment, then they start to lose faith. They start to wonder, why am I filling out this survey? Is anyone going to pay attention to it? Does my
Mm.
opinion matter? And
Mm.
so I think the biggest miss is not in how we're doing the listening, it's in how we act on what we've listened to.
The active listening, yeah, exactly, which carries action based on that listening. Yep. The action, the lack of action diminishes trust. I liken it to a bank account. You are overdrawing that account, that emotional intelligence account with your employees when you fail to act. You can have all the wonderful surveys and focus groups, what have you, but until you say, here's what we heard, here's what we're doing about it, help us do it better, and then you take those actions, you're just overdrawing their trust accounts, aren't you?
Absolutely. The way you described those three pieces, where there's the delivering the action, but before they're saying, here's what we're going to do,
Mm.
and afterwards saying, here's what we did.
Yep,
That's how you get credit for doing this work.
that's right.
Employees don't know what's going on in the heads of their leaders. And so when something changes, they don't necessarily realize it's because of what was shared in an employee survey or it's because of feedback that the team has offered. When leaders connect those dots and really make it explicit that we are going to do something because of what you've said, then they do it. And then we have done this thing because of what you said. And we've still been listening. And so now we are going to do this next thing because of what you said. That's
Hmm.
the cycle where we're closing the loop and really earning that credibility, building up that trust bank account rather than throwing action out there and hoping that we get credit for it because employees have intuited why we've made those changes.
Yeah, it's like throwing spam sandwiches against the wall and seeing what sticks, right? Absolutely crazy. One of my favorite things to do, I'm just gonna, I'm really not sadistic, but one of my favorite things to do is to look at an executive and say, what did that team say when you shared the results with them? And then I think the phrase "deer in the headlights" was was coined by the response again. I mean, you see that all the time too, right?
Absolutely. There's a lot of questions that executives will have about should we be sharing this data with the
Mhm.
employees? And I have to wonder, Have they ever been to a water cooler? The actual numbers might be surprises to the employees, but what's being said is not. If there's something there that's shocked them, that would be the first. They know what's going on in the organization, oftentimes better than the leaders are doing.
Oh,
And if
yeah.
they see that the leaders are willing to talk candidly about what they are hearing and really take on those difficult challenges, it just shifts the dynamic of that conversation in a
Mm.
really productive way.
Oh, it does, and it moves it from here to here in terms of performance and creativity, innovation become competitive advantages for you at that point because of that active listening loop that you've established. So let's say we've created the type of peak performance culture that we're talking about here. It's very positive driven. There's this dialogue going on, communication, clarity, active listening loops are in place. How do I, when I'm sitting with someone, whether it's on Zoom or across the table from someone, and they're top talent, and I want to attract them, not recruit them, because I'm not selling sizzle. This is the stake of attraction, right? For this kind of culture. How do I communicate to them that our culture really is this way and they can expect to be encouraged to peak performance with the kind of support we're talking about?
One of the things that's really important is to understand that a great culture is not going to be great for everyone. If we've really taken a position on our culture, there are going to be some people who absolutely love it, and some people who feel like this isn't my gig. This isn't what I signed up for.
Hmm.
The more we can be clear about what is going to be great in this culture and who this culture is not set for, we're
Hmm.
going to be able to attract the people who really want to be in that environment because they're going to hear us saying, here's the types of people that won't fit in. And they'll be
Hmm.
like, yeah, that's the group I don't want to be part of. What you're describing is what I want to sign up for. Great attraction comes from being clear about who's not going to be a great fit.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that it then becomes a self-selection process. I mean, as the employer, sure, I'm going to see it. I hope to see it anyway. But the top talent candidate needs to be self-selecting. Here's a clear picture of the culture. This sounds like what we're doing in the culture, right? In this very conversation. A very clear picture of the way our culture functions, and here's what we will do to support you in your own peak performance. So let's say this self-selection process occurs, or mutual selection, perhaps I should say that, occurs. It's a winner for both sides of that table. We're now sitting beside each other at a table. What do I do, Colin, to ensure that that person stays on the team? Because we lose billions of dollars every year in the US alone with just not caring if someone stays right on the team. The divorce rate's very high in corporate America today. So what do I do to ensure that top talent is retained to our teams?
Charlie Munger had a phrase that I'm going to paraphrase that he made a lot of success in investments by just avoiding the stupid mistakes. I feel like retaining talent comes down to just understanding there's fundamental mistakes that are really easy for leaders to make. They can fail to recognize and appreciate their talent. They can fail to ask what's motivating someone right now. Because that can change over time. They
Mm,
can fail to tailor the way they recognize or appreciate things to that particular employee. They
mm,
can forget to give the employee a sense of why their work matters or to give them projects that feel meaningful and challenging in a fulfilling way. And if you manage to avoid just some of those basic things to overlook, you're going to go pretty far in keeping people who are excited to be there and ready to step up to the bat for you.
So just go pluck the low-hanging fruit and do what you
Yeah.
said you were going to do. I love it. That's a great Munger quote too. I love it. And by the way, there are smart mistakes, just in case you're wondering. And we were talking about those earlier, right? So help us bridge what for some of us, Colin, is a gap between, and whether it's emotional or intellectuals, beside the point, it's just a gap between a data-driven approach to performance management and more of a human approach to performance management. Because for some of us, those are mutually exclusive. We just have a hard time bridging that gap. Talk to us about how we do that.
Bringing data into the HR and performance space really requires us to take a different mindset of what good data practices look like. For most of us, the model of data is the finance team or the engineering team who have spreadsheets that go down to multiple decimal points of precision.
Mhm.
And that makes sense if you're measuring the thickness of your steel or the dollars and cents in your bank account. It doesn't make sense when we're talking about dimensions of talent where there's so much variation and ambiguity. And
Mm.
rather than trying to force it into a box of numerical precision, I encourage leaders to shift their mindset from data is used to be precise to a mindset of data is used to reduce uncertainty. Because we don't need to know that someone is a 4.8 out of 5 on an engagement score. What we need to know is it worthwhile for us to engage this person further so that they're less of a flight risk? And when we start defining, here's the decisions we need to make, then we can start seeing that very simple data points can give us enough uncertainty reduction that now we can make better decisions.
Mm.
If I'm curious if someone's ready for a new step in their leadership role,
Ah.
I can try to give them a leadership readiness score,
Mhm.
or I can look at their last two stretch assignments and talk with the people who are managing those efforts about what they did well, where they have opportunities to improve, and how likely they are to succeed with what sort of success or what sort of support at the next step in their career. And
Mm.
so by being really intentional about what decisions do I need to make here, then it becomes a lot less intimidating because I'm not trying to measure a human to the nth degree. I'm trying to figure out, is this a place I need to dedicate resources or attention or supervision? Or is this a place where it's not the business priority right now? It's not the critical risk I need to manage. It's not the thing that requires looking deeper in order to figure out what's going on.
So instead of being mutually exclusive, it's both and. It's a combination of narrative and data. And I love the fact that how important is it that they're 4.8 out of 5? You know, are they engaged? And then how do we combine the anecdotal evidence, if I can call it that, or narrative evidence from their peers and others, particularly around leader readiness?
Yeah. Knowing someone's a 4.8 out of 5, does that mean they're ready to be promoted? If they were a 4.7, would I need to change my approach? I don't know what that number means or how to act on it.
Mm.
But we can very easily flip things around and say, when they've had the opportunity, have we seen them demonstrate some of these skills that they're going to need at that next level? Are they able to cope with the genuine like challenges of their current level effectively? Right. And when we start getting into some of these data points, we're able to very quickly narrow down this person's ready to fly. This person, they need some support even to be successful in their current role, right? This
Mm.
person, right? There might be some questions here, but we can narrow that down to these are things we think they can navigate through with a little bit of help. These are things that are very typical challenges as someone moves into the next role. These are things that might be blockers. And so we can give them additional at bats in order to better calibrate our assessment. There's a
Mm.
lot of ways that we can approach that when we take it from the lens of what's the decision I'm making? Is this person ready to be promoted? Do they need additional support when they first step into that role?
Yeah. So what we're really talking about is aligning human behavior with the KPIs of the organization, right? And really trying to ensure congruence there so that performance of the individual is at a peak as well as the company is achieving its goal. What are some of the challenges that you see companies facing today as they seek to do that?
One of the biggest challenges that I'm seeing today is just a lack of trust up and down the organization.
Mm,
There have been so many changes that organizations are navigating through with returning to office, with challenges around layoffs or restructurings, with shifts in executive leadership, with threats of job losses from AI, that employees are really nervous about where they stand and what does their future look like. Executives who don't recognize that the general business climate has a trust deficit are not going to be paying enough attention to whether that deficit exists in their own organizations or their own teams or their own relationships. Because
mm.
here's the challenge: if you're an executive, you may not hear when people don't trust you. They may not volunteer that information to you. And so, if you're not proactively recognizing that there's a gap or could be a gap and not being really forward with trying to create transparency, clarifying expectations, letting people know where they stand, letting them know what the strategy and the vision is, then they're going to try to fill in those gaps. And the way they try to fill in those gaps may not align to reality, but it
Mm.
certainly can impair their ability to perform at their best.
Yeah, particularly when it takes them out of alignment with where the company's headed, but it's that lack of information, which again is that lack of trust. Dr. Joey here with a question. What if the key to growing your work culture hides in plain sight? Take the free Work Positive Culture Assessment to discover it. Get insights in less than 4 minutes that transform your culture so you grow people and profits. Just answer 13 simple questions and discover your culture stage, your strengths, and get personalized next steps. Receive your free aha culture moment at workpositive.today. Go to workpositive.today right now. Dr. Colin Hahn is my guest on this episode of the Work Positive podcast. So down in the show notes, you're going to find his LinkedIn profile there. That's a great way to get in touch with him and to message him using LinkedIn. So that's where most of us live today. What other challenges do you see in addition to the trust factor?
What really is coming to mind for HR professionals is that right now there's a lot of worry that we're not being strategic business partners. And how do we shift from being transactional, compliance focused to really strategically partnering with the business? Here's the big risk there. In an environment where there are people being made redundant and departments are being cut, to say what we've been doing in the past may not have been delivering value and we want to do this new thing can feel really dangerous and unsettling.
Hmm.
But the only way out is through. If we don't step up to the plate and say, there's something we can do that will add more value to the organization. And it's going to require us partnering with you differently than we've done in the past. But we think that now is a good time for us to do that because the business needs it.
Hmm.
If we can open that conversation, I think we'll find that we have a lot of opportunity to influence and improve our organizations, both from a business perspective, but also from a human perspective.
Mm, I love that. Yeah, and that's a huge conversation we're having today. I I liken it to transitioning from transactional to transformational. And transformational certainly speaks even to the CFO because we see the ROI paying out to the bottom line. My next book I'm working on is on engagement, and I was looking at the numbers around companies that are, well, the S&P 500 companies that have high engagement scores, so high that they've won Best Places to Work awards, which of course are employee-driven responses. And I think they outperformed the S&P 500 by like, was it 154%, something like that. So you take an S&P average of 8 and it transitions up to like 17 or 18% return on that company's. I mean, so they're able to pay greater dividends and what have you. And that's because, as you just indicated, the human factor is in there. It becomes transformational for the individual. The individual is aligned with the company. So therefore, the company transforms as well, not only in customer satisfaction, but also the financial bottom line as well. Dr. Colin Hahn is my guest on this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. As I mentioned a moment ago, we can go to LinkedIn and send you a message there. What are your favorite kind of messages to receive on LinkedIn, Dr. Hahn?
I love to hear about what people are working on. I think that there's so many great, creative, innovative practitioners in our space, and the more that we can share ideas with each other, the better we'll make this entire field.
Oh, I agree, man. It is really ready for harvest, and as we cross-pollinate with one another, right, that harvest gets more bountiful. So, Work Positive Nation always wants to know from my guest, Colin, about their one thing. So, Colin Hahn, Dr. Colin Hahn, what's your one thing that you would recommend to Work Positive Nation that they start doing today to create the kind of positive work culture that we're talking about?
Find an employee who's doing great work that you know you've recognized, and recognize them anyway. Because however often you think you've done it, it may not have landed with them.
Wow. And do it in ways that are significant to them as opposed to you. All right. Speaking their recognition language. That's amazing. I love the way that you said that because it's don't just recognize them, don't just pass them over because you think you recognized them before, but go back and do it again. I mean, can we ever get too many atta girls or atta boys?
I mean, I certainly haven't.
I'm still waiting on a few, aren't you? Dr. Colin Hahn has been my guest on this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. I have learned an immense amount. One of my huge takeaways is this mutuality between understanding data and human potential and being able to look at them as cooperative and collaborative. Thank you so much for that insight and so many others today. Thanks for your time and wisdom today, Colin.
It was great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm grateful you joined our conversation about creating positive work cultures that grow people and profits. Connect with me directly on LinkedIn today. Just search for Dr. Joey Fawcett or click the link that's below in your show notes. When you send your connection request, mention that you're a podcast listener because I want to give you a free digital copy of my Work Positive Team Edition book. That's a $19.95 value. It contains practical strategies that I've personally used with clients to transform toxic work environments into thriving cultures. We explore how to create a positive work culture in every single one of these episodes. Our LinkedIn connection, though, allows you and me to directly talk about your specific challenges. I personally read and respond to your messages because I genuinely care about your success in creating a positive work culture. So go to LinkedIn and let's connect. Remember to mention you're a podcast listener to receive your free Work Positive Team Edition book. I look forward to seeing you on our next episode of the Work Positive Podcast.